On MSNBC, Bernie Sanders reacted to the mass shooting that took place in Oregon, and he also offered some insight as to what types of reforms he would implement in order to stop mass gun violence in the U.S. from taking place. Take a look.
And the president is right. Condolences are not enough. We've got to do something. We have to stop shouting at each other. We need sensible gun control legislation. And by the way, we need to significantly improve mental health services in the United States of America. And I'm pledged to do everything that I can in both of those areas.
Yeah, is that something that if you were elected president, is this something that would be a priority for you? And have you thought about how you go about putting in place the policies that could reduce the amount of mass shootings we see?
Well, I don't think anyone has all the answers, but I think some of the components are, first of all, guns should not be in the hands of people who should not have them. People who have criminal records, people who are mentally ill, and that means we need a very strong instant background check system. Number two, we have a huge loophole right now in gun legislation, in that unlicensed gun dealers can sell guns at these gun shows. That's the gun show loophole, which has to be eliminated. And in my view, which is somewhat controversial, I don't think in this country we should be selling or distributing weapons that are designed just to kill people, automatic weapons, military-type weapons, and that's what I voted for. But what we need, Chris, as a nation, is to get beyond the shouting. You got some people who want to ban every gun in America, and some people believe in nothing at all. I think the vast majority of the American people, as the president indicated, including gun owners, and I know that's true here in Vermont, want sensible gun control legislation. And they also believe that we should have more access to mental health facilities and counselors than we presently do. The bottom line is, if somebody is suicidal, somebody is homicidal, you got to make sure that that person gets care and attention immediately, not 2 months from today.
You reference that your constituents in Vermont, a state, of course, you represent. That's a state that, as my understanding of the statistics, has relatively high levels of gun ownership, relatively low levels of gun violence compared to some other states. Yes. You've also you voted for some gun safety legislation and against others. You voted against the Brady bill. You voted for instant background checks. You voted against a bill that would have allowed lawsuits against gun companies. Has your thinking on this evolved over time? Have you been influenced in how you think about it in discussions with your constituents who are gun owners?
Well, I think we are all disgusted and horrified by these mass killings. And as the president indicated, we're tired of sending condolences. And we know that it could happen tomorrow. It could happen again a month from now. I have voted, as I said a moment ago, for what I think is the most important provision. And that is strong instant background checks to make sure that people who should not have guns do not have guns. And I have voted to eliminate this gun control loophole, which is what we have got to do. And, you know, I think, Chris,
but if I could
that
just
at the
say,
end of the day,
if I could just say, Senator, I just,
yes.
There's two things about this. One is that it strikes me as, you know, it may prove to be a more difficult policy problem than we're prepared to admit about keeping guns out of the hands of the wrong people. And it may be that isn't enough. The sort of items that you've indicated, that if we need to take a more robust approach, like, say, in Australia or in England, which the president mentioned today.
Well, I don't know that anybody knows what the magic solution is. What we do know is the current situation is not tenable. It is clearly not working. And as the president indicated, we can and must do a lot better. So I believe, but I'll tell you what also I believe. You know, you can sit there and say, well, I think we should do this and do that. But you got a whole lot of states in this country where people want virtually no gun control at all. And if we are going to have some success, we are going to have to start talking to each other. And here's what I think is the good news, that I think there is a consensus for serious gun control, including among people who own guns. And I think that's what we have to bring about. And the fact that we have folks in Congress who don't even want us to get information about shootings in this country and fatalities, that's pretty crazy stuff. So I think the job is to bring people together and say, yes, we've got to move forward. We've got to move forward aggressively. Stop the shouting, and let's work together.
So basically, he proposes expanded access to mental health care, a federal background check system, And he also wants to close the gun show loophole and ban semi-automatic assault weapons. I'm on board with all four of those things. I would also add that I also want to limit high-capacity magazines. I want to create a federal gun registry. I would like to mandate gun safety training programs for people who buy guns. I want to institute waiting periods for guns. I also want to drop the ban on the CDC from studying gun violence, because right now they're actually legally prohibited from studying gun violence. How crazy is that? I would basically regulate guns just as Republicans regulate abortion. But American culture, unfortunately, is not conducive to that, so it's not a feasible political option. So we can't really get serious about implementing more strict controls on gun ownership until culture changes in the U.S. Now, when it's the case that over 90% of the American people want universal background checks, and this includes a majority of both gun owners and NRA members, well, then we have to at least do that, because that's what's politically feasible. The goal is compromise. Now, at this point, I'm honestly willing to concede on a lot when it comes to reform, because as long as we at least take a step in the right direction, I'll feel a little bit more satisfied, but I don't think we can really do that. We have to have both parties come together and agree on something, but Republicans cannot come forth and agree because of money in politics. So to give you guys an example, there was one Republican who came out in favor of universal background checks. Now, this is an individual who got an A rating from the NRA, but because he opposed universal background checks, well, the gun lobby basically bankrolled his opponent's campaign, and then he was defeated for proposing reasonable gun reform. So that's what's at stake here. It's such a contentious political topic that you can't even suggest modest reform if you're a Republican. And that's a problem. Now, when it comes to Bernie Sanders, he is someone who I think could actually get gun reform in some way, at least if it's just universal background checks and to close the gun show loopholes. I think that could potentially make a bigger difference because he's more of a moderate. He's voted both for and against certain types of gun reform. So, for example, he voted against allowing victims of gun violence to sue gun manufacturers. Now, most liberals and progressives might actually disagree with this, but that's not necessarily a bad political move, because allowing the families of victims of gun violence to actually sue gun owners, or excuse me, to sue gun manufacturers, well, that would give them the incentive to want to lower gun violence. But at the same time, if you state that you do want to allow the families of victims of gun violence to sue gun manufacturers, then you look a lot less reasonable. Well, then it looks as though you want to destroy the gun industry. And I think that at that point, you may lose more responsible gun owners. So the takeaway from this is I don't have any idea of what we could potentially do to get gun reform. We can't do anything. So the question that I pose is to individuals who are responsible gun owners. What would you do? What would make you feel as though we are not infringing on your Second Amendment rights? I agree that repealing the Second Amendment and banning guns is off the table, not just because I'm against that in principle. I think that it would be extremely difficult to implement. Just like banning drugs doesn't stop people from getting drugs, banning abortion doesn't stop people from getting abortions. It is the case that people will still get guns. So my question is, what do we do? I mean, are you in favor of universal background checks? Are you in favor of closing the gun show loophole and making it so that way if you're a felon, you can't just go on Craigslist and purchase a semi-automatic assault weapon? We got to do something. If you state that doing nothing is the answer, you're not reasonable. You're just as unreasonable as people on the opposite side that say they want to ban guns.